Good afternoon. I'm Shannon Derejo from Creamer Media Webinars. Welcome to today's webinar on ESG in mining, where a panel will unpack initiatives to promote ESG and sustainability in mining. Today's webinar is sponsored by SRK Consulting, BME, and Xpotential Mining Services. We thank them for their support in making this webinar possible. Before we begin, please be aware that we have enabled the Q&A function, so please post any questions into the Q&A. You'll find this on the panel at the bottom of your screen. Our panelists may not be able to answer all of your questions during today's hour-long webinar, but we will read through all of them. We've also enabled the chat facility so you can post your comments in the chat. You'll also find this at the bottom of your screen. Please do not, however, post any questions in the chat as we may miss them. Post all your questions into the Q&A instead. Please be aware we are recording this webinar and will be sending the recording to you when it's available. Today's webinar will be facilitated by Emily Gammon, an associate at Wentzel. Emily has experience in corporate and commercial matters with a particular focus on the mining industry. She also has experience in public interest litigation and ESG projects. Emily will facilitate the discussion with our panel, which includes Wouter Jordaan, a principal environmental scientist and partner at SRK Consulting; Nishen Hariparsad, the technology and marketing division leader at BME; Thomas Gustavsson, the CEO of Hypex Bioexplosives Technology; Joshua Kilani, the MD of Xpotential Mining Services, or XMS; and Birch, Executive for Sustainability and Business Support at Orion Minerals. I'll hand over now to our facilitator, Emily Gammon, to get the discussion started. Over to you, Emily.
Thanks so much, Shannon, and thanks to everyone for joining today's webinar. We've got some very impressive CVs on the panel today, so I'm going to just take another minute or two to run through those and introduce our panelists in more detail. First of all, we have Wouter Jordaan from SRK Consulting. Wouter completed his BSc Honours in Environmental Management and GIS at the University of Johannesburg and joined SRK in 2003. He's currently a partner at SRK South Africa, a director of SRK DRC, and has a focus on battery minerals. His expertise includes environmental and social due diligence, permitting, closure planning, and responsible mining and sourcing. Next, we have Birch from Orion Minerals. Marcus holds a BSc Honours in Geology from the University of Exeter and a BCom from the University of South Africa. He boasts more than 30 years in mining and minerals exploration experience. Beginning as a geologist at AngloVal, he transitioned to procurement and supply chains at AngloGold Ashanti, leading a global sourcing strategies. From 2008, Marcus held senior roles at Clarity Minerals and HPX, managing projects in Africa, Australia, and South America. Since 2017, he has contributed as part of Orion Minerals' executive team. Next up, we have Nishen Hariparsad from BME. Nishen has over 25 years of industry experience and has worked at leading explosives providers like Sasol, Orica, Davy Bickford, and NAX. He holds a degree in chemical engineering and an MBA. Since joining BME in May 2022, he has led the technology and marketing division. I then come to Thomas Gustavsson from Hypex Bio. Thomas holds a master's degree in electrical engineering from the Royal Technical Academy in Stockholm. Since 2006, he has focused on developing and commercializing energetic materials and products. In 2020, Thomas became CEO of Hypex Bio. And last but not least, we have Joshua Kilani from Xpotential Mining Services. Joshua is a consulting exploration geologist with over 12 years of experience, and he holds an MSc in mining engineering from the University of Witwatersrand. He has managed exploration programs globally and worked in brownfields exploration for multinational mining companies. Recently, Joshua has been a carbon consultant for the mining, investment, and banking sectors, utilizing his expertise with UNFCCC regulatory bodies. So we really have a wonderful panel today, representative of many voices within the mining industry. I think what's particularly interesting about our panel today is this mixture of perspectives from technical compliance to ESG and sustainability. For me as a lawyer, that bridge from compliance to creating lasting sustainability solutions is really exciting and such an amazing journey to be on. So I hope that today's discussion will bring out some of those nuances from the E, the S, and the G, and the technical and compliance work which embeds those considerations into the industry. So without any further introduction, I'd like to get right into the panel discussion. I'm going to start out with Wouter Jordaan. And Wouter, my first question for you is, from your experience of working in Africa and specifically in South Africa, how is ESG creating value and resulting in sustainable mining legacies in South Africa?
Thank you very much, Emily, and thank you everyone for joining today. Yeah, I think, if you look at ESG now, that's evolved over time. ESG used to be mainly governed by regulatory requirements in different countries. And it's really evolved to a point now where, it's not really the regulatory requirements that are really driving ESG. It is more your external factors, your shareholder activism. People really want to know whether something is mined responsibly, etc. And, we're seeing a whole landscape changing. I mean, if we look at the various aspects that's driving ESG there, it's a constantly changing area at the moment. So, yeah, what we're seeing at the moment with ESG is, companies are embedding it in their DNA. So, from a board level, the decisions are being made and filtered through the mining companies. And what is really happening now is that, ESG is considered really at the outset of mining operations when a mine is being planned right through to closure. And in doing that, the mining companies are realizing that, they can take accountability throughout the journey, the mining journey. And they also can be proactive. So you don't need to deal with, compliance issues throughout the mining, throughout mining. You can predict certain aspects. We've got good models and technologies, that you can latch onto. And I guess, that creates a whole new, if you look at the legacies previously, of old mine, all tailings facilities and waste rock dumps that nobody wanted to take, how can I put it, responsibility for in the past. You can't hide around those things anymore. So I think that landscape has evolved quite significantly. If we look at closure, there are various standards in place now. We've seen quite recently with ICMM, including this social transitioning to closure. And, we are seeing some very big changes happening, around those aspects at the moment. So a lot of the mining companies are voluntary, join these organizations on a voluntary basis, but embedded in their DNA. So we're really seeing a big move away from regulatory compliance to embedding ESG into a company's our company functions into its DNA.
Thanks, Wouter. And I think just touching on that issue of voluntary contributions of mining companies and how mining companies are really embedding this into their DNA, I want to turn to Marcus from Orion Minerals, taking that question of creating value to the specific operational level. So Marcus, as a junior miner with a limited budget, how does Orion Minerals ensure that it is a positive catalyst in its host communities through ESG?
I think some of what I'll say is going to echo quite strongly with what Wouter just explained. But certainly as a junior explorer developer operating in South Africa, we don't have the resources of the established majors. So we've had to evolve, let's call it a pragmatic fit for purpose approach, but it is absolutely baked into the way that Orion does business. It's integral to the Orion way of doing business. And it's something that we focused on right from the start, where we first have got involved in our project areas, which for those of you familiar with Orion Minerals will know are in impoverished and underinvested areas of the Northern Cape. Despite the long lead time that a junior company explorer such as ourselves has from establishing an exploration presence through to a producing operation. I mean, globally, there are statistics now that says that time lag can be up to 19 years. we've managed to shorten that here to about 7 years, but it's still a long lead time where expectations are created, particularly amongst the host communities where you establish yourselves. So, we took a very deliberate decision right from the start to follow let's call it a very deliberate approach to our ESG, and particularly the social aspects of that in the areas that we operate in the Northern Cape. When you get into those areas, there's two things that people are interested in. It's jobs and it's procurement opportunities for small businesses in that area. We can't provide instant opportunities, but what we can do is focus on preparing those host communities for the future opportunities that the mining operations will have, and bridging the gap between the existing capabilities within the community and what will be required by the operations. So we've almost developed a process. We've rolled it out in September for our Prieska copper zinc project there. And we're in the process of rolling out a very similar sort of template in Namakoi district for the O'Keepe copper project. So typically, it revolves around deploying local presence in terms of a CSD, a community social development or community liaison officer, opening a community liaison office, establishing a broad-based stakeholder engagement forum. One of the things that we've done, which I think has been very successful, is establishing online CV or employment database and procurement databases where we can collect information about local capability, and then drawing from this to undertake occupational assessments of local individuals upon which we can base our training and development programs. And likewise, in terms of suppliers, it's undergoing a vetting process of host community businesses so that we can understand the capability and then identify those companies that have the potential to be developed as we develop and implement our mines, or develop our mines and move into the operational phase. We can selectively bring host community businesses along with us. So as I said, we have consciously from the start set, along with the community, set aspirational targets for host community involvement in employment of 50% and procurement of 30%. And we're putting in these building blocks to help us get there jointly with the communities. I should also say, I think that, even though we're a junior, we have to comply with South African mining legislation. And I think to a large extent, ESG principles are already pretty well baked into the legislation. So, the fact that we have to put together a social and labor plan, the fact that we have to put together an environmental authorization, they encapsulate world-class aspects that make it, that facilitate, if you like, the achievement of our ESG goals through these regulatory sort of environments. I'm not saying that we rely solely on that, but I do think South Africa's got a very mature ESG regulatory framework in that respect.
Thank you, Marcus. I think Marcus has explained so clearly how the ESG framework in South Africa really lends itself to the mining sector. But I want to now ask Joshua what your view is on whether the mining sector is playing a leading role in ESG uptake in South Africa, and sticking with some of these kind of practical explanations that Marcus has given us of what they've been doing. What is XMS's contribution in that regard?
Thanks. I wouldn't categorically say that the mining industry is taking a leading role in all aspects of ESG, but the stage is certainly set for it to take a key role. Like Wouter said, the industry has long grappled with matters of sustainability. From an environmental perspective, resource management in itself is an environmental activity. It has a long legacy of environmental impacts. Not only is the mining industry a significant contributor to things like carbon emissions, but it's also usually the first source of these emissions in most production value chains. So if you look at the current ESG pull factors, those are primarily centered around decarbonization and environmental protection. And look, none of this is altruistic, and it's not all you know, tree hugging and happy. It's just, you know, actual facts. It's you know, the climate change dilemma poses significant problems and risk to human existence. And your environmental issues like biodiversity, I mean, those are, you know, biodiversity, the infrastructure that secures and safeguards the Earth's existence, you know. So these pull factors are creating a business incentive, and you know, companies are engaging with it because that's the incentive coming from investors, and that's the reason the investors and other stakeholders have such incentives, you know. From a social point of view, mining definitely has, you know, been a significant sector in South Africa, definitely has a lot of potential to take the lead in ESG uptake. You know, it provides a lot of economic, social, infrastructural benefits that could potentially contribute to sustainability and delivering on the SDGs. And then, you know, there's also the simple fact that, you know, you can't have a green future without raw materials. And if, you know, there's that saying, if it ain't grown, it's mined. So, you know, the stage is certainly set for mining to take a key role. You know, like Marcus mentioned as well, from a governance perspective, most of the ESG imperatives are embedded in mining law compliance, you know, so within the regulatory frameworks of NEMA and, you know, the Mine Health and Safety Act and the MPRDA, there is ESG elements in there as well. But I think the key for mining to get to that stage where it takes a leading role is it needs to move beyond just compliance, and it needs to actually move towards a more innovative, you know, unconventional thinking approach. And that's what's going to allow mining, with all the potential it has, to take its rightful place in taking the lead in ESG uptake in South Africa. And then
Thanks,
I think
Joshua.
you asked what we do, our contribution in this regard.
Yeah, that would be great to hear.
Yeah. So I think, you know, again, we just are trying to assist the industry in leveraging that platform so that it can take advantage of the benefits and position it plays and could play, potential position it could play in taking the ESG lead. We firmly believe that innovation and the technical know-how for innovation is embodied in the mining industry. So we come from the mining industry. You know, we're a bunch of earth scientists and engineers and all sorts of things for our sins in a previous life. But you know, we see ourselves now as ESG enablers, you know. So our ESG business is built on two firm beliefs, and that's a belief in data, and the fact that data is one of the most valuable resources in the world, and also a belief in market-based mechanisms. So, you know, verifiable, quantifiable, provable data is key to unlocking critical insights and intelligence. And, you know, market-based mechanisms can provide that monetary or financial leverage that help get marginal projects across the line. So we believe that there's a lot of potential in market-based mechanisms, particularly on the African continent, to bridge that funding gap that exists, that finance gap. And yeah, that's, you know, that's generally the role we play. It's centered around good quality data and leveraging market-based mechanisms.
Thanks, Joshua. And that sets things up quite nicely, because I'd like to turn now to discussing some of the more technical aspects. And as you've said, that move from compliance to innovation, we've got some great examples of that on the panel today. Nishen, I want to start with you from the BME perspective. BME obviously supplies critical products to the mining industry throughout Africa, and that's a complex and critical supply chain and a crucial role to play. So Nishen, how is BME helping to ensure a sustainable value chain through its ESG roadmap by addressing carbon emissions, waste, and integrity?
Thanks for the question, Emily, and hello everyone. Well, sustainability is an integral part of the way BME does business. Our sustainability framework is underpinned by 4 key pillars. social responsibility, environmental stewardship, sustainable economic growth, and governance and compliance. And in terms of our products, solutions, partners, and commitment to the industry, these are centered around these pillars with the application of our systems. My colleague Joshua mentioned that he supports that innovation is embodied in the mining industry. And if I could give an example, now the industry is well aware of mining's reliance on electricity, and many firms have already sought means to move to autonomous energy inputs to reduce dependency on diesel generators, for example, and offset the cost of producing ore. There's one fundamental benefit that BME has implemented is the use of our access blasting system, which is through electronic blast initiation. Now, this is a way for mining companies to consume less energy. You see, blasting is a fundamental step in the mining process, and a quality blast will generate predictable consistency, muck piles, and dilution. This makes everything easier, from digging to crushing to mill throughput and ore conversion. And in doing so, a good blast reduces carbon emissions, eliminates waste in the production chain, and makes for a more efficient mine. An efficient mine, in our view, is a greener mine. And at BME, we have a duty of care to people, the environment, and provide innovative, intelligent, and sustainable solutions across the value chain in the industry.
Thanks, Nishen, for that. And it really is so exciting to hear about that kind of approach from BME. I'd like to stick with the explosives technologies and move on to Thomas from Hypex Bio. So it's really exciting there to consider the technical innovation that is happening in the space of explosives. And Thomas, I'd like to ask you, what role are nitrate-free explosives playing in achieving ESG targets in the mining industry? And how do these nitrate-free explosives compare with traditional explosives technologies?
Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you so much for having me on the call. I first just would like to say that I really appreciate some comments from our colleagues here, especially Joshua, really putting some emphasis on the importance of innovation and mining as a driver for the global society. And I also would like to say that in terms of ESG, sustainability practices, I would say that sustainability practices really connect into operation, aligns what Nishen just said in terms of efficiency. Good sustainable practices in terms of economical sustainability, environmental sustainability, and operational sustainability aligns with profitability and economic sustainability. So I think that's kind of like the framework we're talking sustainability. We have to look at all of these aspects. And if we look at the mining industry, now I'm Swedish. I'm sitting here talking to you from Stockholm, Sweden. So I'm maybe not the expert on South African mining, but in mining in general, we are looking at three, let's say, verticals in terms of emissions. We're looking at electricity, energy, we're looking at fuels, and we're looking at explosives. From my side, those are the three main aspects. Explosives are probably the smallest part of emissions, but they contribute a significant amount of issues for the mining side. Today, explosives are dependent on a very, crucial raw material, which is ammonium nitrate, which is predominantly used, the chemical, to produce traditionally emulsions and alcohol used in the mining industry. And that leads to a plethora of well-defined problems, everything from gas emissions in post-detonation fumes to water pollutants such as ammonia and nitrates and so on and so forth. And we also know that ammonia, which is mainly, in terms of nitrates, it's mainly used for fertilizer, which is crucial for the sustainability of humankind. So explosives is a small part of ammonium nitrate, but it leads to issues in the mining industry. And what we are trying to do with Hypex Bio is to remove the ammonium nitrate, replacing it with hydrogen peroxide, which addresses some of these emission issues, both in terms of indirect emissions from production of raw materials. Hydrogen peroxide are cleaner to produce, at least here in Northern Europe. We remove the nitrates and the ammonia, which eliminates the post-detonation fume toxicity, which mainly is nitrate oxides, and also eliminates the the water component, ammonia and nitrate leaching in the water. And I believe an arid country such as South Africa, I think having good governance in your water treatment is one of those crucial ESG parts that more address health and safety and social sustainability rather than emissions. So those are the things that we focused on mainly, and that's the core value drive of what we're doing. And to your other question in terms of performance, we've spent a lot of time ensuring that our technology is, let's say, operationally non-disruptive. And this means for Scandinavian markets, which we operate in, we have technology that looks the same, is used the same, and has very similar results in terms of performance, in order to have a smooth transition into the mining industry, which very understandably is hesitant to shift energetic products. The risk profile is high. So I think we have succeeded in that here in Sweden and in Norway. Our products are used in similar ways with similar performance.
Thanks for that, Thomas. And it really is incredible to hear about that kind of innovation that's being used so successfully. I think I'd like to stick a little bit with this discussion on emissions and carbon neutrality, because there's a lot of perspectives on that on this call. So I'd like to start with Joshua. It obviously is such a challenge to transform the mining industry to a cleaner industry, and we've heard some examples now of how this is happening. How is XMS helping the mining industry turn emissions challenges into opportunities?
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, and that's a valid question, and I think just from a business management perspective, whenever there's a challenge, that means there's opportunity as well, and it's all about just applying yourselves to create an opportunity out of the present challenges. So I think right off the bat, the lowest hanging fruit for companies is to understand that a positive decarbonization performance relative to your peers is in itself a competitive advantage. But beyond that, what we try and do at XMS is we try to leverage the monetary power of the voluntary carbon markets or your sustainability markets to facilitate accelerated transition to a low carbon economy. So that the role of market-based mechanisms in the mining industry, the mining industry can really is a prime example of an industry that can really leverage what market-based mechanisms have to offer. If you look at mineral processing and how cost intensive it is, and also how R&D in that space is also quite costly. So, the role of market-based mechanisms could incentivize companies to take on alternate solutions, and in doing so, not take on as much of that financial risk. So a lot of marginal projects can kind of come across the line now because they have that funding gap is provided. There's a lot of innovative solutions out there, and sorry, Marcus, to put you on the spot, but I've come across some solutions Orion have ideated that are potentially very innovative. I mean, like your vapor metallurgy research that you were undertaking, things like that are quite risky in nature, but they're cutting edge, and it really comes at an opportunity cost. So if market-based mechanisms can subsidize this cost, you'll see a lot more companies, and like Marcus said, they're not quite a major miner. So, the opportunity cost for them, investigating such alternate solutions it comes at quite a premium to them, and so I think, again, if we just leverage all the tools in our ESG and climate change toolkit, which market-based mechanisms are one of them, it really can help in transitioning these challenges into opportunities and catalyzing the ideas that come out of these technical hubs that, again, like we all are stating, exist within the mining industry. Another thing about, emissions and the markets, and, it's a problem without a border. It's a borderless problem, so it shouldn't be limited by geographic limits. And what your market-based mechanisms allow you to do, again, is it removes the necessity for geographic limitations in your mitigation solutions. So it has massive potential to just broaden what you're able to do as a mining company that is energy intensive, that does need to do a certain physical, does live within certain real and physical constraints, scientific constraints. It does just open up the realm of possibilities for companies within the industry. There's a lot of challenging, real physical, scientific problems in the industry that require collective and multidisciplinary thinking to approach them, and that's what we try and do. Every case is a different case, and we look at it uniquely. We understand the industry, we come from the industry, and we just try and ideate novel, unconventional solutions to deal with these future problems, if you want to call them that, problems, things we have to juggle that we never had to juggle before.
Thanks, Joshua. I think you've set me up quite well, because I wanted to go to Marcus next, and I wanted to hear a bit more about what Orion Minerals is doing in this carbon neutrality space. So Marcus, how have you weaved ESG into your business model through initiatives such as the carbon neutral roadmap and perhaps some of the initiatives that Joshua had also touched on?
Well, thanks, Emily. Yeah. So, I mean, look, obviously Orion is aspiring to be a producer of the green future-facing metals in support of this low carbon future that we are all envisaging. And in pursuing this objective, obviously we are investigating and actively progressing, sometimes on the almost on the bleeding edge in terms of technological solutions that can support that strategy. So maybe just two that I can just talk to quickly. The one is the one that Joshua just mentioned, actually, which is we're pioneering research into this metal vapor refining technology for the production of high purity specialist metal ultrafine powders that are used in the electronics and chemical industries. And we're looking at application particularly on our Xpotential project, which is an early stage exploration project, copper, cobalt, nickel, PGE, very, very exciting project. But it really, this type of technology really is going to be the deal maker, if you like, in terms of the economic viability of such a deposit. And obviously, with this type of metal vapor technology has a significantly lower carbon and lighter environmental footprint than traditional refining technology. So that's one that we're very excited about and that we're pushing hard. And I'll certainly talk to Joshua offline around how there might be some synergies with his initiatives. And I think the other one is around our use of or planned use of renewable energies as part of our power solution for our developing projects, both at Prieska and at O'Keep, and obviously potentially at Xpotential when we get there. I think we're blessed in that the Northern Cape, where our projects are located, is probably one of the best locations in the world for renewable energy, both in terms of solar radiation and consistent wind. So it's a natural magnet for renewable energy projects, both wind and solar PV, and there are many existing ones and obviously a lot more planned. But the ones that are in the planning are currently subject to limitations because of the Eskom grid constraints, which we hope are in the process of being resolved. And what we're seeing is, since we started looking at this in our early studies, is that the renewable energy space is evolving and maturing very fast at the moment. I mean, we're literally being inundated by options at the moment from renewable energy solution providers or potential providers. And that ranges from these sort of new one-stop shop wheeling solutions where you literally pay a per kilowatt hour rate that's often promised to be at a significant discount to what the Eskom rate would be, through to behind the meter sort of captive developments where obviously we are ideally located if we were to go down that route. And I think that what we do have is the benefit of time on our side. I mean, we're entering into the development phase for our project, So, we're taking time to evaluate these from obviously a technical and commercial basis, and to identify the best options that will meet our aspirational carbon emission reduction targets over time. So yeah, there's a couple of examples of how we're trying to move forward in terms of our carbon neutral roadmap. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks so much, Marcus, and that really does sound very exciting. I almost called you Market, which shows what an influence you're having. I just want to touch now on something that that Joshua mentioned about collective and multidisciplinary approaches, which is obviously how we achieve so much of this innovation. And I want to go here to Nishen from BME. We know that partnerships are so critical to realizing ESG goals. So, Nishen, what is BME's relationship with Hypex Bio, and how will the relationship help in achieving ESG targets?
Well, Emily, BME understands the importance and the growing demand for reduced carbon technologies. Within the mining sector, we have seen a significant need for decarbonized mining, with most of BME's valued customers now publishing their own carbon reduction commitments. In order for Omnia and BME to be a collaborative partner to the mining industry, it is vital that we meet this pressing need. We have an emulsion system called Innovex, and if I can just expand on its waste oil value proposition, or rather, let me expand on the nitrate system that it presents. So it's important to note that emulsion systems used in blasting use nitrate inherently, right? And our Innovex emulsion system uses a dual nitrate system. That by default consumes almost 50% less ammonia than conventional single salt or single nitrate emulsion systems. Now, this is a direct benefit in minimizing ammonia leaching in mine waters, and reducing toxic NOx fumes or emissions in the blasting phase. And looking ahead to building a greener industry and achieving ESG targets, BME's strategic partnership with Hypex Bio is an investment in the future of mining, of the mining industry. Traditional explosives, as I just mentioned, are nitrate-based, which discharges carbon dioxide during the blasting process. And hydrogen peroxide technology, such as that used by Hypex Bio, is currently one of the only technologies with a path to carbon-free blasting, reducing carbon by up to 90% in raw materials, production, and transport. As always, every business decision we take is aligned with our purpose in our business, and that is innovating to enhance life together, creating a greener future. This is a fundamental reason for partnering with a like-minded partner like Hypex Bio to step into a new era of more sustainable and safer blasting. This partnership, coupled with our used oil emulsion technology and our digital blasting solutions, contributes to BME's commitment to being a sustainable and a responsible producer of products, not just for ESG targets, but more so for the direct health, safety, and well-being of our planet and its people.
Thanks, Nishen, for that. I think we're then well positioned to get the other side of this partnership's perspective from Thomas. But I think it's also important to think about this here, where we talk about partnerships, the context is of course so important. So with Hypex Bio coming into the South African context to partner with BME, I'm interested to know nitrate-free explosive technology has mainly been tested in colder climates, and Thomas, you spoke about how it's doing well in Sweden and Norway, I think you said. So how is Hypex Bio testing these explosives in warmer climates with the help of BME, and how is that going?
Well, thank you, Emily. So obviously we are Swedish, and the way we develop technology is always industry aligned. This means that we have partnered with the mining industry here in Northern Europe to develop technology that addresses their specific needs, and hence this is the background of us focusing on colder climate technologies, which we have today. Moving into hotter climates, we will face additional challenges or other challenges that we have here in Scandinavia. The way we normally process this is obviously we study together with our partners, in this case BME, we study what is the requirement of the market, what type of methodologies are we looking at, what applications are we looking at, surface mining, are we looking at underground mining, what type of underground mining, and so on and so forth. And then we do method studies to see what are the specific requirements and the specific handling needed to address these targets. And then we normally start with obviously risk studies. We're very safety focused. We do risk studies, and then we set up laboratory testing in our facilities here in Sweden. And once we have chemistry, once we have application and knowledge about the compositions and let's say a way forward, a strategy, we communicate that to BME, and they continue to take that into a larger scale. We go into a pilot phase very likely in these climates. And it's important to understand that we're dealing with energetic materials. Energetic materials requires specific consideration in terms of safety and risk, which means that we have to scale. We start with very, very small compositions, very, very small test batches, and then we scale it up. BME's part in this is essential because they have the market knowledge, they have the resources, they have the understanding of the local market, which would at the first phase be input and requirements to us to design this. But the next step is to align with the mining industry to start trialing and piloting. And this is an iterative process, and which we know here in Sweden, it takes time, but it's also been successful for us to develop, let's say, develop something that the customer actually wants. It's very dangerous to stay too long in a lab, because then you tend to be alone with your thoughts and you develop something that the customers you think they want, but at the end they want something different. So you need to go to the customers as soon as possible. So the partnership is, BME is our enabler. They know the market, they know the application, they know the technology. We don't know the market, we know the technology. So this combination makes us ideally positioned to quickly implement this technology in their market, which is mainly South Africa.
Thanks, Thomas. And it really is such an important thing, the context in which you operate and how you transition into that new context from an ESG perspective. So it is great to hear that thought process that has gone into it. I'm going to come next to Wouter. I've got one more question, and then there are a few more questions in the chat, which I will start asking. The question I want to ask Wouter is around investors and stakeholders, and it's such an important aspect of ESG, is looking at how that flow of investment comes in and adheres to ESG principles. But I'm just flagging that there are a couple of questions also in the chat that relate to this, asking about investment and also reporting. So Wouter, I'll ask you my question, and then hopefully that'll touch on some of the things that our attendees have asked in the Q&A, and feel free to ask more questions if you feel yours wasn't answered from that reporting and investment perspective. So Wouter, what impact does ESG have on investors' decision-making and stakeholder confidence? And then a related question to that is, investors and stakeholders have to look to reporting standards when it comes to ESG and to determine those investments. Do all mining companies apply the same ESG reporting standards, and what reporting standards have you seen applied in South Africa?
Yeah, thanks, Emily. I think, if we look at the landscape at this stage, so I just want to adjust my screen quickly. It is, sorry, just 1 second. My screen just moved without Not me looking at it here. So yeah, I think what we're seeing at SRK, especially with mergers and acquisitions, is that a lot of the deals actually do hinge quite a bit on ESG aspects. We've seen a KPMG survey that was done in 2023, which basically found that half of deal makers basically walked away from transactions due to ESG or material ESG findings. So it definitely plays a huge role in the way that investors look at assets, look at companies. And I think also, if you look at stakeholders, ESG plays a very, very big, very important role in terms of, we're involved in the DRC, looking at battery metals and, all the standards that are now being applied there. And it's a little bit, we have different standards, and I'm going to talk about the standards and I'm going to interlink it in my answer. But, the one reporting aspect is, when you do report, when you've got an established company, you report on stock exchanges, you've got ESG requirements that you need to report to. And then what we're seeing on the ground now, especially with responsible sourcing and responsible mining, is a complete different set of standards that are being applied. And, it could be commodity specific, it could be a bit broader. We're seeing aspects like the copper mark, cobalt specific standards that are being applied, to which companies need to report, not report to, but need to, comply with. So, and it's really driven by your car manufacturers, your battery manufacturers downstream, wanting to ensure that their reputational risk is managed, and that they understand exactly what they are letting themselves into. But they also work very closely with the mines in order to to ensure that those gaps that are identified are being filled. So, I think what we are seeing is that disclosures and, transparency is becoming so much more important from various aspects, whether it's from a JSE listed a company, whether you listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, or whether you supply, to a car or battery manufacturer. You need to ensure that you have a system that can provide environmental assurance to your stakeholders and to your investors that you are mining responsibly and that you are practicing sustainable practices. So yeah, I think that kind of summarizes it. I'm just trying to keep it brief because it's quite a broad landscape that you're talking about here at the moment.
Thank you, Wouter. No, it is indeed a broad landscape, but I think that covers it quite well. Thank you. We've got quite a lot of questions in the chat, and some of them are overlapping a bit, so I'm just checking which ones we should start with. I've got a question that asks, are companies diverting some of the funds allocated to their environmental rehab as part of their ongoing ESG activities? I thought, Marcus, perhaps you might be well placed to answer that, or if anyone else would also like to take a stab as well.
Yeah, obviously, we're in the early stages of developing projects. So we have environmental rehab guarantees for our exploration or prospecting rights, and we have environmental guarantees that meet the requirements of the DMRE for all our mining rights, mining operations. And so it's a legislated guarantee that you need to have in place. So we certainly haven't diverted anything from any, they're pretty much locked up, those funds, so you can't divert any funding from them. So we've, our approach is that we and again, we're not generating revenue yet, so we are reliant on our shareholders for anything that we fund in terms of ESG initiatives. So yeah, I think the answer to that would be we're certainly at the stage of pipeline progress that we're not doing that.
Thanks, Marcus. Yeah, I think from a legal perspective, it's true that those funds are locked up. There's a couple of questions in the Q&A which I think are important on the role of the S in ESG, or the social considerations. So one of the questions is, would you mind clarifying the misconception that ESG is only limited to environmental issues? From my understanding, it's a lot broader than this, specifically the governance and ethics there too. And yeah, there's a couple of other questions that are similar to that. So apologies if I haven't touched on yours specifically. But I'm not sure if anyone would like to answer that. Joshua, maybe you could start. Wouter, you might have.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I could give it a stab.
Yeah, go for it. Thanks, Nishen.
Yeah, if I could answer from a mining services perspective, companies will create the future of the industry in collaboration with surrounding communities. That's where the S comes in. Not despite them, not in isolation, right? And this includes and illustrates the importance of building a clear vision for social engagement and striving to articulate that vision. If the development of whether it's automated mining or electrification or innovative nitrate-free solutions is accelerated by ESG challenges, so must the efforts to enrich communities where the minerals are mined. And so the mining industry needs to have a clear mandate to reinvent itself as a highly responsible, highly engaged, essential sector of the business. This mandate can only be strengthened by initiatives of ESG, as an example. And the social governance perspective, definitely has a large part to play in that. I hope that answers the question.
Wouter, do you want to add something as well? Thanks, Nishen. That does answer a lot of the question.
Yeah, I think, the focus always was on environmental and, social and governance used to be put on the back burner. But I think mining companies realize that they, without having, without focusing on the social component, that you can't actually operate. We call it like it's a social license to operate. If you can't, if you don't understand the communities that you operate within, if you don't understand their requirements, if you don't communicate with them in a way that makes sense, I think you're setting yourself up for failure. And a lot of companies have invested a lot of money into building better relationships with communities, ensuring that there are allowed opportunities to be employed, looking at the human rights aspects, etc. Quite a broad aspect. We're also looking at things like like GISTM. We're looking at tailings management. You think, what does a tailings dam have to do with the social environment? But if you start looking at human rights, and you're looking at tailings facilities that are high risk to downstream communities, mining companies are taking that a lot more seriously now, looking at those risks. So, it's not only looking at it, it's all the way down from a board level to what's actually happening on the ground. We're also seeing in Africa many mining companies that are being acquired by companies that are situated in different countries, and that really creates social differences. You don't understand the culture that you're working with in the country that you are moving into, and it's so important then to spend time, understanding these issues, ensure that you employ local labor to assist and facilitate those processes. So definitely, the social component is really an important aspect of ESG.
Thanks, Wouter. I'm actually seeing a flood of questions about the social aspect coming through on the Q&A now. So it's definitely something that people are concerned about. And as you said, I think the environmental has sometimes been the kind of focus of ESG, and it's so important, of course, to focus that attention back to the S. Another thing that's been said here on the chat is if the panel could share their thoughts on how the social needs of communities might be better addressed by mining companies, including understanding the needs of host communities. And I think that's always a tricky thing from a company perspective is how much are you actually able to go in and address some really serious issues, and as Wouter has also touched on, the context that you're operating in, especially if you're coming in from an international perspective, it's quite a challenge to understand where to draw that line and how much input you can actually give. I don't know if anyone has a further answer on that, on addressing the needs of host communities.
Emily, so I don't, I think that's something that is going to be very difficult to have a authoritative answer on. But, I just want to comment that I think, whoever asked that question is spot on, because if you look at ESG as you move across, the provides you the easiest platform of challenges to deal with. It's usually is tangible scientific challenges that you can find a solution for that is an objective solution. It's either more efficient or less, or it's either, X or Y. But as you move on to the social and then even more to the governance, I think it just gets increasingly more complex, nuanced, and not as objective. And there's various stakeholders at play. So it's, companies and organizations tend to focus on the E because it's almost like the lowest hanging fruit. And I think that's where, again, in the industry, we have to realize the ESG space and umbrella is so broad that no one's going to know it all. And we need to leverage and partner with each other and collaborate to come up with the suitable solutions. Social's really complex, and even something like governance has evolved to, it's not anymore just about ethical considerations when you talk about governance, but you're talking about efficacy of governance with regards to things like representation, and then there's power and authority issues that come into governance as well. Decision making and who's accountable, and transparency, and so there's just quite a lot to deal with, and I think it's a reason. There's a risk in that as well. You get it wrong, there's much more chance of getting it wrong on the S and the G. So companies do tend to focus on the E, but I think the big understanding is specialization. We need to know ESG is pockets of specialization, and you just need to know who to go to for what part of that ESG umbrella. There's no one-stop shop for all-encompassing ESG solutions.
Thanks, Joshua. Wouter, I saw you came off mute. Did you want to add something there?
Yeah, just something very short. I think it's very, very important to manage community expectations and stakeholder expectations. We've seen quite a few companies, that into a new area, and they make huge commitments at the beginning. And if you can't keep those commitments during your operations, you're setting yourself up for a lot of issues coming in later on.
Yeah, thanks, Wouter. I think that's so true, and I think I'm glad, Joshua, that you touched on governance a bit more as well. It's another part of the E, the S, and the G that sometimes doesn't get discussed as much. But of course, none of this is possible if we don't deal with it effectively from a leadership perspective. I don't actually have a particular question coming through on the Q&A about governance, but I don't know if anyone wants to comment on leadership within the ESG space and on how your organizations are managing governance. I think everyone on the panel is a leader here.
I think, Emily, from our side, again, focusing on our pillars of data and market-based mechanisms, I think governance is very important in keeping those honest. If you want to talk about market-based mechanisms, you cannot have those consolidate and exist if there's no underlying trust. So there needs to be good quality projects with tangible commodities under it. So carbon reduction must be an actual, permanent, real carbon reduction in real life. So for us, the governance aspect underpins keeping things honest. So good, strong governance structures allow things to be transparent, kept honest, which then allow data-driven and market-based solutions to consolidate. So that's the role of governance in our little pocket that we operate in.
Yeah, and I think that also touches on the issue of greenwashing, which has been mentioned in the Q&A as well, and something we haven't yet spoken about, just in terms of the industry as a whole and whether that governance is effective in keeping greenwashing at bay. And Wouter, maybe I can ask you to quickly just touch on this and how we're keeping South African mining companies accountable, ensuring that they don't engage in greenwashing.
Yeah, greenwashing is it's so difficult to monitor if you don't have proper data and if you don't set proper targets. I think everything is data driven at the moment. We've got earlier it was mentioned that we've got a legal framework is in place. We've got good guidelines in South Africa on environmental and social issues. But if you think about greenwashing in South Africa, a lot of the companies, because there's a lot of decisions are being made in Europe, and it then gets filtered through to an African context. I think first of all, companies are grappling with exactly what they need to comply with, and there's a lot of risk in that because you can make honest mistakes. So there are honest mistakes, and then there are dishonest mistakes. And I think, first of all, you need to understand what are the metrics that you want to compare yourself against. What frameworks are you going to align with, and what is really applicable to your mind, in the context of how you set up globally or locally. So first of all, you need to think about that. Secondly, and sorry, I'm just taking a step back. In terms of greenwashing, it is important. And what we're seeing, we're seeing a trend in the mining industry now where they are aligning with responsible mining standards like IRMA, Copper Mark, etc., where it provides a guideline for them to ensure that they can align their operations and evaluate the ESG. How can I put it? The ESG, how they function in terms of ESG, in terms of a framework. A lot of the mines will either go for a responsible mining standard, or they will use various standards and globally recognized frameworks to create their own. And in that regard, they will then have something that they can report against. So, from taking back to your question, how can we hold mining companies accountable? I think we need to ensure that when we need to ask mining companies to have an assurance mechanism in place, we've got a third party auditing the process, to ensure that what is being declared is correct, it's validated. And then I think, also ensuring that mining companies do align with or they basically they live what they say, and I think you kind of pick it up when a mine states that it complies with all the ESG requirements, but they keep on having community upsets and issues. You know that something's wrong there, but it's not declared and it's not really dealt with. I think in terms of, if there's a lot of focus on greenhouse gas emissions at the moment. There's a huge focus on biodiversity, and it is very important to ensure that throughout your supply chain or in your own mining operation that you actually understand how to calculate these. If you don't do it properly, then you may actually fully get into trouble.
Thanks, Wouter. Yeah, I think this data-driven approach is really coming through very strongly from all of the panelists today. We are running out of time now, and I think I'd like to just give each of the panelists a quick closing statement before we wrap up. There might be one or two questions that we haven't got to in the Q&A, but thank you so much to everyone for your questions. I'll start with Thomas. Just any last words from you, Thomas?
Well, obviously, thank you so much for having me. But I would say I think this is a very, very interesting space, and I think we will see a lot of initiatives. I think as climate change is going to affect our daily lives more and more, both our countries, I think that this is going to be an urgent issue, both from a regulatory space, but also from innovation. This seems like the preferred solution we have is not really to change the way we live, but rather to focus on technical solutions, which means that implementation, rapid, quick, effective implementation of technical solution is going to be crucial, not only for South Africa, but for the global mining industry. And I, for one, am very curious to see how we're going to go about that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thomas. I'll go next to Nishen.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, team. Great discussion. From my perspective, I think ESG is a commitment from industry, and it's very necessary that whichever industry you're in or whichever service sector you're in that supports mining, you find frameworks are embedded, underpinned by pillars that can support and drive these imperatives. And I think that's how we can realize a successful ESG outcome.
Thanks, Nishen. Marcus, can I come to you next?
Yeah, thanks, Emily. Thanks for inviting me to participate in this very interesting discussion. I think certainly from our perspective, we see ESG as absolutely critical the success of our business as a junior base metals explorer and developer here in South Africa. And it's absolutely integral to every decision and process that we follow in the company. In fact, we also see it as a competitive advantage. If we can get it right, I think we can as we grow, I think we can actually turn it to our advantage and leverage the benefits that come from getting ESG right. We're slowly dipping our toes into the whole alphabet soup of the compliance frameworks and reporting frameworks. But I think our approach at the moment is, we're just taking it slowly. We're initially just starting by participating in the voluntary national review of the SDGs. I think they're probably at a high level. They encompass pretty much what a lot of or most of the other frameworks maybe espouse in more detail. Yeah, we're absolutely committed. And as we progress our projects, we will evolve our reporting and measurement frameworks accordingly. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcus. Yeah, I think we'll need another session on reporting separately. Joshua, last words from you.
Yeah, no, I think it was, again, great that Marcus actually went in before me and mentioned that about the reporting and the, cautious approach, which I think we've definitely seen in the market, in the industry, with where we stand in ESG, we're very much on the cutting edge part. And with that carries a lot of risk. And we've seen a lot of the stakeholders kind of want to sit on the sidelines and kind of see where it's going before really committing into any of this. And I think it's a sensible approach, but I think also the space has just made so much allowance, for guys at least just getting involved and getting started with something. So I would say, Marcus, there's a lot of allowance in the frameworks. There's a lot of allowance in the ESG space that you get a lot of kudos just for getting it done. It's, first try something and then you can focus on getting it right, So I think the fact that we're having this, we've had these series, Creamer Media have had these series of talks around ESG, also just shows you how far things have come, how far the industry has come in ESG, and particularly the mining industry, from being one of the riskiest activities to, transitioning to where we are now, where we're, leaders in things like SHEC and other aspects and other innovations. So I think it just shows how far we've come. ESG has brought big finance to the table. It has made sustainability mainstream. So now we have the attention. Let's get involved and not sit on the sidelines. And then from us practitioners from our side, we need to, in order to make companies feel comfortable to get involved and not just sit on the sidelines, we need to ensure we consolidate and don't keep changing the goalpost. And if goalposts change and people get burnt, more people are just going to sit on the sidelines. So we have to focus on integrity, we have to focus on standardization, and we have to try and consolidate and give these companies something tangible to work with. So I think, yeah, it goes two-pronged, get involved, but let's create something so guys can get involved and know what they're getting involved in. Yeah.
Thanks, Joshua. And Wouter, the last word is yours.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, I think, if you embrace ESG and you incorporate it into your day-to-day running of your company, all the way down from policy through to your employees, and to the stakeholders and to the communities you operate within, and you take that proactive approach, it will make your operations a lot easier. And if you do, link into the cutting edge technologies, looking at decarbonization, looking at how you reduce energy, etc. At the end of the day, you should see that on your bottom line. So first of all, you don't need to deal with putting out fires all the time. And at the end of the day, if you see that difference on the bottom line, it should make a difference in your operations.
Thanks, Wouter, and thank you so much to everyone in the panel. I think we've covered a lot today, and it's been a really interesting discussion for me as facilitator, so thank you for that. I'll hand over now to Shannon to close out the webinar, and thanks everyone for attending.
Thanks very much, Emily. That does bring us to the end of our webinar. I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you to our facilitator, Emily Gammon, for enabling a robust and engaging discussion on this important topic affecting the mining industry. Thank you also to our panelists, Wouter Jordaan from SRK Consulting, Nishen Hariparsad from BME, Thomas Gustavsson from Hypex Bio, Joshua Kilani from Xpotential Mining Services, and Marcus Birch from Orion Minerals. We thank our sponsors, SRK Consulting, BME, and Xpotential Mining Services for their support in making this webinar possible. And finally, thank you to the attendees for taking the time to join us for this discussion on ESG in mining, where the panel unpacked the initiatives to promote ESG and sustainability in mining. We hope you found this event engaging and informative. We appreciate your participation. Our next webinar takes place on the 17th of July at 2 p.m. and will focus on South Africa's automotive industry, where a panel will discuss navigating global and domestic risks while embracing new opportunities in that industry. The link to register for that event has been shared in the chat. The recording of today's webinar will be sent to you in due course, and if you have any additional questions, please be in touch. You can reach us at shannon@creamermedia.co.za. Thank you so much for your time, and goodbye.